G'day, I'm Laurie with this animate effects that I do. This time on this video I'm going to show you how I'm doing the little figures with the moving arm and a working hand lantern with surface mount lead. How I'm actually drilling out the figures, the back hole which you can cover up later, drilling them out and getting them to work. And whether you want to use it for DCC using a lighting function to drive a little gear motor, the pencil motors on board, or you want to use an ordinary geared motor on the layout and a figure just moving, doesn't matter, but having extra movements on the layout is so much more fun. It is really a lot more fun operating there. Working bells, firemen shoveling coal, conductors waving, children waving out the windows, so much more. Then I've got the calliope or steam organ with sounds from TCS wows and the musicians on a gondola. There are other videos that are on my channel here. So anyhow, we'll show you this figure and how it's done. So I hope you have some fun trying to do this one out. So good on you. Let's start off with some of the tools that I use, that as probably you will too. I've got a stack of little drills, pin vices, an assortment of drills, all the way down to wire drills, number drills. I use local supply here, Guida Valley Models here in Australia, for 17 thou nickel silver wire. That's the main up and down driving rod that I use quite often. 1mm brass tube, and we use also some 10 thou or 12 thou or 15 thou Tichy trains phosphor bronze wire that's actually inside the figure, making his arm move on this figure. That's inside. I'll show you this in a minute. I use Dremel bits. I use my Dremel a fair bit as well. I use a cobalt cutter, a small ball and a larger ball, and therefore going into the backs of the figures here, which you can cover up later on and hide it completely when you get the mechanism inside there, the linkage. It's just a little simple Z bend in there going off to the arm to make the arm move. Just get that moving a bit there so you can see. So his arm's moving, and you can see that bit of wire, tiny bit of wire in there. Well, I'll zoom in a bit more. See if we can get this. Okay, that's the best I'm going to do with this camera. The wire you can see in there is moving. Now on that wire there, it's just got a slight little Z bend in it there, and I'm going to fit the 1mm tube over that. So the rod gets soldered onto that tube going up and down, and that's how I'm getting the movement. And of course the wire down coming out of his leg here is going to have like a locomotive steam driver wheel, little crank pin in it going up and down and up and down, so you get the movement. The other thing that you're going to need is super glue. I use a lot of Aspen models. The Aspen model company, I love their figures. I prefer them. They're so much easier to work with being resin rather than some of these white metal ones. Just showing you some of the differences that you can have. Here's a woman that's sweeping the floor. So I'll get her to move. The amount of movement I can increase, but I've just made that. And all that is just making a apron for her, cutting her body in half. Simple figure. You can have the head turning, and that just subtle movements seem to be better than someone running or something like that. And then different ways to be able to, I've actually got wires up here going to a surface mount lead, but there's another way of getting a figure to move, get his arm to move. So it's different ways. Cutting the arm off, I just cut the arm off. Once I cut the arm off, I usually put a piece of styrene there build that up and make that into a dome. And that, so if I'm cutting an arm off, I'll make that a dome there, and then when I'm drilling into the arm here, I'll make a ball so that you don't see the slot, the gap in the arm so much. It's not so distinctive. So you've got a ball and socket type thing, and so that's rounded up with a ball on it, half a ball, and then you countersink that one in there to make a dome in there, and the arm sits in there, and then you can put a wire through. So that's just some little tricks sharing with you. Whoop. There's another woman that I'm doing there. You can do the engineer's head turning. These are the Aspen engineers. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful detail. And then you've got the switch brakeman there with his club. You can do all sorts of things with that, with his arm off, so he can actually be a figure waving a lantern, or swinging his club, and that, or any other thing that you want to do to get a arm moving. Fireman shoveling coal, that's a figure that I'm working on. The other part there is I use Hobby King Turnigy 36 gauge Teflon wire. This is what I use for all my surface mount leads now, rather than using magnet wire. That's great stuff. I get that from Seattle, Hobby King in Seattle. You'll need files, self-locking tweezers, and then when you're coming to, you need a decent soldering station, and you don't use a wet sponge. Never use a wet. There's a wet sponge there. It's brand new. Never used it. The wet will kill the temperature on an iron tip. Get a nice small iron tip, and for most of the work that I'm doing, I use this curly brass, which has got a treatment on it there, and all I'm doing there is wiping the iron tip in there. That keeps the tip hot, it cleans the tip, and I'm not drenching it in water, so that tip's going to last a long time without the cold water and that contaminants and minerals that are in water mucking it up. Most of the temperatures I can just go up and down. 260 is about good for surface mount leads and soldering those sort of things there. That'll automatically come down. So this is an Australian one that I've got there, but you need a decent soldering station if you're going to do this sort of work with in the hobby, if you're serious about it. So we'll get back into some of these figures. First thing I do is I make a cavity in the back. Usually I prefer the resin figures like the Aspen models, and I just use a Dremel bit. It'll go in the back there, and I'll make a hollow in there, and that hollow goes down a little bit inside, down to about his belt level, and that's so that when I'm drilling up I've got a hole to drill into this cavity that I'm making there. The other part is I leave material at his arm there, which is going to be a bearing later on. Now the other part which I'm using there now is some 12.5 thou Tichy Trains phosphor bronze wire. So Tichy Trains, that comes in 8, 10, 12.5 and 15 thou. So the wire will actually run in the tube, this very small 1mm tube that I've got here, and that's important. Now the thing that we make is this Z bend. So I give about 3/4 of an inch, then I make a bend 90 degrees, and then with these little fine tip pliers, the smaller the bend the better, to get more movement on the arm. So I come in there and I make the Z. Now if you can see that Z, that's the key to getting the arm to move. So that the rod pushing up is going to have a piece of this tube on it. So the tube will fit in, and you can see that that's going to be, the rod pushing up is soldered onto this. So we'll have a rod here soldered onto that, and that's going up and down. As it goes up and down, it's going to move that. When it moves that, it's moving the arm. This piece is going to go into the arm. There's an arm that I've cut off, so that's going to fit onto the figure's arm there. Now, allowing for the meat material inside his arm, that I said we're going to leave some material there. We've drilled a hole through to suit that wire, so there's not too much slack, so it's just nice clearance, and that comes out there. Then we've got to drill another hole into the arm here for that wire to come out. And another trick that I do is I make a slot down with white metal figures and plastic. So I drill the hole and then I cut a slot down here. It's time consuming, but I make a slot so that the wire comes out and then bends. And then I just cover that with some super glue, the super glue to lock it in place, and that keeps the arm in place there then. Getting the alignment is the trick, getting it in there. Now, I normally cut this wire off, this tube off, just the width of the Z bend. So I'll trim that Z bend back. Trimmers. So what I'm left with is just using my lead tester. Turn the hand lantern on and off. So what's happening there is these wires will run down this leg, and the other wire will go up. This 17th hour wire that I've got there, nickel silver, will run up his leg and be soldered onto the piece of tube on that Z wire, horizontal. So I'll call that one the horizontal and the vertical wire. So there's the hole drilled through the figure there now. So we feed the wire through him just to make sure it's going to be okay. You can see wire runs through, and now we just got to cut off the piece of brass tube and solder that on. Now I've tinned the little bit of brass tube that I've slid over the Z horizontal wire, and the vertical wire I've just tinned the end of the that as well. So we keep that tip clean and a fresh bit of solder, and we go in there. And hopefully this is going to work for you. Now there's his arm moving. Now we're just pushing that wire. Let me straighten his lantern up a little bit. And come around the front way. You can see. There we go. One animated figure. And you can see what I've done there with his shirt. Cut off his shirt sleeve there because he's short sleeve shirts, and like I said, I've concaved that so you don't see a gap inside there in the arm. So by the time I touch up paint it, that's going to look pretty good. There you go. Now these wires, I've got to run them down the other hole that I've drilled in his leg. Run those down. I'll just solder a tiny bit of wire onto both of those and just thread it through so they're coming out. That's how I'm doing animated figures. It's a technique that I've developed. The other side of it is that back. I just go and put some glue around there, Arlene's tacky glue, and a piece of paper, and cover that, and then I just touch up paint, and you don't see the hole in the back. On-board animations, there's the conductor waving his lantern, and the children waving out the window. So you can see animations on board over the back there. Get the bell working too at the moment. Only got one throttle and a camera in the hand, trying to do it all. We've got the gondola with the musicians on it there. We've got the guy shoveling into the fire and making the boiler for the steam calliope and that, and the conductor, we've got to get him going in a second, and then the kids waving and the conductor there. This is the madness that I enjoy, and that on the layout. I'm still building down the back end there. This is my array. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed.